So when I'm looking at the front page of the fast track, I'm always going to look at two kind of key things. One, I'm going to look to see how they're selling. And this is going to indicate to me how well their products are aligned with customer expectations. If they're not aligned with customer expectations, usually sales are going to be a little bit lower. Their sales are middle of the road. So their sales are definitely not what's causing a main issue with their profitability. They have to sell enough to get their profits up. That's kind of the key component. So that doesn't seem to be the major thing that's impacting their profitability right now. The second thing that I would look at is their contribution margin. This, again, really good measure of profitability. This is going to look at their revenue sales minus their variable costs. So their material costs, their labor costs, the amount of money that they're spending on carrying inventory as well. So you can think of this as kind of like their gross margin. The higher the number is here, essentially the more that they're making on every single sale. A good benchmark for this number would be around 30%. 30% should give them enough to kind of cover all other costs, things to keep their factory running, those types of things. So, and still give them a decent amount of room at the end. What you'll notice is that Team Chester, as you've pointed out, is kind of the industry star, and I would completely agree with that. They have the highest sales and the highest contribution margin. So you can see how those two things really pay off when it comes down to profits. So Andrews, they've got okay sales, but they're really struggling with that margin. So this looks to be like the main thing that's really holding them back. Now, getting their contribution margin to increase usually doesn't happen overnight. It just depends upon what's causing this to be a little bit lower. So we'll have to do some further digging to see, are they not bringing enough in as far as revenue? So that would be related to the pricing that they're offering customers, or is it that their costs are too high and they need to invest in some things that they can do to reduce cost? If it is an investment component, that will take time, and this issue won't be fixed in 1 year. So I bring that up because a lot of times teams get frustrated when they want to see an extreme change happen immediately. Extreme changes in performance usually don't happen immediately. It usually requires investment, and that takes time to really see a return on that investment. So Andrews, by the way, they're not doing terribly. They're certainly doing okay. They're absolutely behind Chester, yes, but Chester is also doing exceptionally well. So they're not in a position that they can't recover from. So, and they're not in a terrible position either. It's just maybe not as appealing as some of the other positions of their competitors. So I would definitely remind them of that. I don't typically see teams get really, really frustrated when their performance is at this kind of level because they're still doing okay. Things could be a lot worse for this team. So keep that in the back of your mind too, because this is a pretty easy thing to fix, whereas some things can happen that aren't as easy to fix. But I get it, they're in a competitive environment, so they're going to want to improve and kind of try to keep up with this other team, Chester. So let's take a look at what they're doing with their products. When there's an issue with margins, I always like to look at page 4. And I like to look at page 4 because we get a breakdown of what they're offering as far as pricing. And we also get a breakdown as far as how their costs are looking. So first thing that I would look at is pricing. Andrews, if we look at their pricing in comparison to Chester, we can see that Chester is offering a much higher price for their main product, cake. Cake is priced quite high, and it's still actually selling more than Team Andrews, their product for their product Able. And it's selling to the same market. So if you look at this second column, this primary segment column, you can see that Able and cake are both low-end products. Now, what do we know about low-end? this is like the Walmart type of customer. They really, really are price sensitive customers, and they don't care as much about product design. So that makes it seem like Team Andrews is doing things quite well because they're offering a more appealing price. So from a sales standpoint, yes, having this lower reduced price is going to help them sell towards this target market for Able. What it won't help them do is to make money. So what they've done is they've lowered their price before they've really lowered their costs. And so what Team Chester is doing differently is, yes, they're offering a higher price, but they have to be doing other things pretty well as far as the product design that is outweighing the fact that they're priced $10 higher than Team Andrews is. So a lot of students make this mistake. They think that pricing is the end-all be-all. It is not. There are other things that customers care about. It is an important component, yes, but it is not the only component. And a lot of students really, really miss that point. So I would remind them of that. And this is a great example of when you can show that actually being true. Because even though, you know, cake is literally $10 higher than Able, it's still selling more. So this product is still a little bit more, you know, it's capturing more sales. Now, what you'll also notice is that this unit inventory column is 0 for everyone else except for Team Chester. So what that means is that there were stockouts. So Team Andrews didn't produce enough, Team Baldwin didn't produce enough, Team Digby didn't produce enough, Erie and Ferris. None of the teams except for Team Chester produced enough. So that leads you kind of to the next point, whereas even though they were selling more, part of the reason that they probably sold this much was because nobody else produced enough to fulfill their demand. So an important thing to do is to look at kind of where these products fall. So if we go down to analyze the segment analysis page, a quick way to view that is if we look at this December customer survey score. So this is the very last column. Now, this last column is going to show us how appealing the product was to the customers. So the higher the number here, the more satisfied that customers are with the product. Again, this doesn't just look at pricing. It looks at positioning, so it looks at performance and size. It looks at reliability, so it looks at the MTBF. It looks at age, and it also looks at marketing budgets. So it really looks at everything that a customer would consider when they're making their buying decision. And it has them weighted as the customers weight different areas of the buying criteria. So what you'll notice is that cake is actually the least appealing product here. So cake did sell more. Cake sold more really because of the fact that customers had nowhere else to purchase. So their sales were a little bit inflated in this past round because the other teams didn't produce enough to fulfill their demand. Now, Able was also a pretty appealing product. It was tied for second as far as most appealing in this market. You can see that the survey score was 17, highest is 20, and then Erie is also at a 17. So Able is a very appealing product for this market, but they didn't produce enough. And you can see that through this actual versus potential market share. So this little bar graph in the middle here. So the red, this maroon color, shows you the potential. So that shows you the market share that they would have captured had they produced enough. And the yellow shows you what they actually captured given how much they produced. So when the potential is higher than the actual, it just means that they should have sold more. You'll see the opposite is true for Chester. Their potential is lower than their actual. That's because they really should have sold less. They should have sold less, but they didn't because Team Baldwin and Team Andrews didn't produce enough to meet their demand, and in a pretty big way. So one of the things that's really holding Andrews back is not producing enough. If they produced enough, their sales would have been much higher. Now, earlier I was talking about pricing. I pointed out that cake has a significantly higher price That's probably why there is less demand for cake, because it is one of the more important things. A $10 difference is pretty extreme. A couple dollars might not make that big of a difference depending upon the other variables. $10 is a little bit more extreme. Now, with this pricing, while their product wasn't as appealing, what Team Chester did do well is they hopefully realized that there was demand in the market that wasn't going to be met by their competition. If demand is going to exceed supply in the market, you can charge a higher price. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be making a significant amount more on the sales that you do have. And that's essentially what happened for Team Chester in this round. And that really helps them be exceptionally more profitable. So based upon this, Team Chester, they're actually not doing as well as the numbers might tell you initially. They're getting a little bit lucky due to Team Andrews and Team Baldwin not producing enough. So Team Andrews, Team Baldwin, they need to produce a decent amount more to make sure that they're meeting their demand. Now, part of the reason why their demand is this high is because of the fact that they are offering that lower price. Now, their demand can be much higher than it is, like we see here. But again, they still want to make sure that their pricing is in line with their cost, so that way they can ensure that they're profitable. Even if they had sold more as they should have, so if they had produced enough, at the margin that they were operating at, they probably still wouldn't have made very much money. Would they have made a little bit more? Absolutely. Would they have made just as much as Chester? Probably not, because Chester has a much higher margin than Team Andrews. So this pricing is one way in which they're generating a lot of demand. If they want to keep up with this pricing, if they want to keep their price for Able at $30, then they need to look for ways to reduce their costs, because this price of $30 doesn't currently match their cost to create the product and to produce it. So how do we see their cost? We can view that back on page 4. So if we look at the material cost, sorry about that. If we look at the material costs and labor costs, they're a little over, $20, and they're charging only $30 for the product. So that's giving them a contribution margin of 29%. That's pretty close, but their other product, Atom, is really dragging down their overall contribution margin. So Atom is at a 15% contribution margin, but this is a brand new product. So if they want to keep up with Able, right now the margin for this product overall isn't bad. It could be a little bit higher though, so they can continue to think about ways to reduce the material cost and labor cost. Some ways that they can do that: the material costs can be adjusted through adjusting the MTBF. So the higher that the reliability is for the product, the higher that the material cost will be. You can think of it as making the sensor with steel as opposed to plastic. Steel is going to cost me more, but it's going to last longer. So this is something that they can do. If they were to reduce their MTBF, that would reduce their material cost. It might only reduce their material cost by, let's say, 20 cents. That might not seem like a lot, but that 20 cents is going to add up very, very quickly, given how much they're selling for this product. But MTBF is correlated to how much they're going to sell and how much their demand is. So this is a component of the customer buying criteria. So there's always a trade-off. So this is why, again, teams, I always have to remind teams there's a trade-off involved in meeting customer expectations but still being profitable. And they have to find that balance, and there is a balance to find. I always use the example of technology. What I would love? I would love to go and get the latest iPhone and only pay a few $100s for it. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. That's not the kind of pricing that is being offered for phones. It's just not even possible. I would love that, but it's not feasible for me as a customer, because that's what they want to make money. Now, I understand that cell phones are charged at a much higher rate than the rate to produce them. That is absolutely true. So in this example, that might not align totally correctly, but the cost to produce is only slightly less than what they're really charging for Able. So they want to make sure that they're constantly addressing that for Able, and more importantly for Atom, because Atom is struggling a little bit more. So they can reduce material costs through MTBF. Labor costs can be reduced through automation. So the more highly that they automate, the lower that their labor cost is going to be. Now, when it comes to automation, what's the trade-off here? The trade-off is that it takes their products longer to be updated in R&D. Atom is a high-end product, so they don't want to automate too highly for this product to ensure that they can keep up with the high-end expectations as far as positioning.